China is a country with thousands of years of history, and throughout most of its history, China was ravaged with plagues, famine, and warfare, resulting in millions of deaths. In conjunction with that, it is not rare to stumble upon historical records of people in China eating human flesh, sometimes out of desperation during war and famine times. Eating human flesh, no matter what the reason, sounds ridiculous, but there are many bloody records of cannibalism in Chinese history. This video will talk about several examples of cannibalism in ancient China. Taking the Han Dynasty as an example, we can see all these frightening written records of cannibalism, as per mentioned in the list in the video. As you can see from the recorded dates, it is evident that cannibalism occurs rather frequently during the Han Dynasty. The main reason for the occurrence of this cruel phenomena is famine. Ancestral trauma is speculated to be inherited. Maybe that's why many Chinese nowadays are naturally skinny even though their food is of big portions. There are also some man-made factors for cannibalism to occur, the most obvious being war. During the Tang Dynasty's infamous Anlushan rebellion, which caused the death of approximately 36 million people, roughly 20% of the world's population, the troops of Zhang Xun and Xu Yuan were surrounded by the troops of Anlushan in Suiyang City. Later, because of being surrounded by enemies for too long, everything was eaten. Crickets, horses, mice, sparrows, etc. were all eaten. When no animals were left, everyone exchanged children to eat. They can't bear to eat their own children, so they exchanged. Zhang Xun killed his wife when there were no children left. So, starting from eating Zhang Xun's wife, everyone tried their best to eat women. When all women were eaten, men were eaten next. There were a total of 60,000 people in Suiyang City. When Alushan family broke through into the city, only a few hundred people were left. In the Tang Dynasty, Yang Xingmi's forces surrounded Guangling city for half a year, cutting the food supply into the city. The people in the city are too hungry, so the army publicly caught people and sold them, tied them up, and killed them like pigs. This is another cruel example. Women and children were tied up and brought to the market to be sold. After the butcher buys it, he slaughters the meat like cattle and sheep to make money. It was recorded that human meat were sold at a cheaper price than dog meat during this period. During the Qing dynasty in 1801 AD, Luo Siji's troops lacked rations and food. Therefore, they killed their prisoners and captives for their meat to consume. This solved his troops' issue of lacking food to eat. Such cases of killing captives for their meat is not uncommon in Chinese history. There were also plenty of claims that mentioned that human flesh tastes very similar to pork, and its texture is indistinguishable from pork. Personally, I have never eaten human flesh, so I cannot justify whether this is true. Some other examples of cannibalism in ancient China include cases of revenging against the enemy. When Wang Mang of the Han Dynasty was killed, dozens of people rushed to eat him. His tongue was eaten raw without cooking. When Hou Jing was killed as a punishment for rebellion, his dead body was stuffed with salt, chopped into pieces, and displayed publicly before being consumed by his enemies. Emperor Yang of the Sui dynasty cooked the rebel Hu Sizheng to death and distributed the meat to hundreds of officials to be eaten. These are several examples of cannibalism out of many in China caused by hatred. Here is another famous Chinese legend. Legend says that the king of the kingdom of Chu asked an ironsmith to make a sword, but the ironsmith could not finish it in 3 years. He then found out that the ironsmith made 2 swords instead of 1 without informing the king. So he went to kill the ironsmith. The wife of the ironsmith gave birth to a son, and the son always wanted to revenge by killing the king. The king got the news and granted money to whoever that can kill the son. One day, the son met a warrior. The warrior told him that he can revenge for him, but he needs his head. So the son chopped down his own head to the warrior. The warrior then presented the head to the king, and the king was very happy. And they planned to eat the head. But he was told that the head must be cooked in a pot until it is rotten to prevent the spirit from becoming vengeful. So they put the son's head into the pot to cook. Oddly, the head cannot be cooked until rotten, so the king was invited to take a look. Once the king was near the pot, the warrior chopped down the king's head, and then the head dropped into the pot. The guards came near and the warrior chopped his own head. His head dropped into the pot too. So the three heads then rot in the broth and no one could identify who is who. So the three heads were buried in a tomb together. The tomb is now situated in Henan province and is now a tourist attraction. In addition to that, there is another special example for the purpose of cannibalism, which is to cure diseases. It turns out that in Chinese tradition, there is a superstition that when a person is sick and he wants to get well, he must eat the flesh of his or her own relatives. This kind of belief is that human flesh can cure the disease. A man named Chen Zhangqi in the Tang dynasty wrote a medical book which pointed out that human flesh can cure diseases. Since then, the claims slowly spread, and ordinary, uneducated people who are dumb enough to believe it really believe this claim. When parents were sick, filial sons and daughters-in-law will come out and cut the meat on their thighs with a knife. They believe that the flesh of one's own body can be a little help to the illness of their relatives. That's cannibalism with good intentions. Then in the Mongol-ruled Yuan dynasty, there were also examples of this kind of act. The history of the Yuan dynasty records that the Qin sisters in Henan wanted to cure their sick father. One sister cut out her own brain and the other sister cut off her thighs. Brain juice is used to cook medicine and thigh meat is used to cook porridge. Also, during the Yuan dynasty, there were examples of cutting the flesh to treat illnesses for relatives. The man who cut his own meat, his own flesh, to cure his father's heart disease was named Hu Banlu. He did successfully cure his father's disease, but whether this recovery is due to the consumption of human meat was unknown. This kind of behavior was rewarded and encouraged by the government. He was given 5 pieces of silk, 2 goats, and 1 paddy field by the government for his selfless action. Although the motive of cutting your own flesh as a sacrifice to be eaten is considered filial piety, it is in conflict with the traditional Chinese concept of filial piety. The traditional Chinese concept of filial piety is that a person's body, hair, and skin are all passed on to him by his parents and he cannot destroy them. The most famous representative of this behavior is Zheng Shen, a disciple of Confucius. Before Zheng Shen died, he tremblingly checked his whole body and found that all his nails and limbs are intact. Nothing was destroyed and he felt worthy of his parents, and then he died with confidence. Another famous example is a general, Xiahou Dun, during the Three Kingdoms period. Legend has it that he was shot by an arrow in his eye when he was fighting in a war. When he quickly pulled it out, all of his eyeballs were pulled out. He yelled at the time, "The body was given by my mom and dad, so I can't throw it away. So I will eat this eyeball into my belly," he said, and then he ate his own eyeball. Some of the examples of flesh cutting for eating are not limited to treating illnesses for loved ones. Some have political effects, thus indirectly affecting history. In the spring and autumn period, Jing Wengkong was in exile. His minister Jie Zhitui cut off the meat from his thigh and gave it to Jing Wengkong to eat when they ran out of food as a sign of trust and loyalty. Another example of the political role of cannibalism was during the Qing dynasty around Emperor Xianfeng's reign. Empress Dowager Cixi is the wife of Emperor Xianfeng, but she is not the eldest wife. The eldest wife is the Empress Dowager Ci'an. Legend has it that before the death of Emperor Xianfeng, he was afraid that Ci'an would be bullied by Cixi. He especially gave Ci'an a secret order saying that if Cixi bullied anyone, she could be killed. After Emperor Xianfeng's death, Cixi respected Ci'an very much. Her purpose was to deceive Ci'an and make Ci'an destroy the secret order. One day, Ci'an became ill, and Cixi cut off a piece of meat from her arm to boil as medicine and gave it to Ci'an to eat. Ci'an felt very touched, thinking that Cixi was simply like her own sister. Why did she have to make secret orders for her sisters? So Ci'an decided to burn the secret order. Who would have thought that Ci'an would burn the secret order and Cixi would easily deceive her in her fight for power? Later it is said that Ci'an died suddenly and was poisoned by Cixi. After all of this was caused by cannibalism at that time. I hope you all like this video. Please don't forget to subscribe. I really wish and need to hit 1000 subscribers as soon as possible, and as always, thanks for your support, thanks for watching, and goodbye.